Oh man, the Indie World presentation just ended, and we have a bunch of new Nintendo Switch games that just got announced for the Switch 2. And in today's video, we're going to be going over everything that was shown off in the Indie World from both the Switch 1 and Switch 2. On top of that, we have other news regarding Nintendo Switch 2 games, regarding a demo relating to Hollow Knight Sliksong. Oh my gosh, all of that is stuff that we're going to be talking about today. So sit back and enjoy as we go through these headlines. So as I mentioned, the Indie World presentation happened today, and I wasn't really expecting much because with Indie Worlds, you don't really know what to expect here. There's typically some good stuff here, but I always go with the lowest of expectations just because Nintendo a lot of the times just do weird things. And we're under the impression now that supposedly a direct will happen now. If you guys don't know, this whole thing got told by Switch Force. He covered this. He said that we're in a Nintendo three-finger plan. They're going to do a partner showcase, an Indie World, and then at some point later, they'll have a Nintendo Direct. This is all to make the big Nintendo Direct bigger, to get rid of these third parties and indies. That's what he said. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but we're definitely in a weird stage of Nintendo right now where we just don't know release dates of anything, but we still got some cool stuff to show off here. For example, they opened the Indie World with Mina the Hollower. Now, I've been very pumped for this game, but what was very interesting is they confirmed that the demo was now available onto the eShop, but they also confirmed that they're making a Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game. They didn't go into any detail of the differences of the Switch 2 edition and the Switch 1 edition, but considering the type of game that this is, I don't really think there's going to be much of a difference, but I'm sure Yacht Club Games will make a response to that at some point, or we'll figure it out when the game comes out. This is going to be an awesome game that will be coming out on Halloween. Really nice to see Yacht Club coming back with a new game. I think Yacht Club Games is an amazing developer, and I will definitely be picking this up day one. I just hope that at some point they're doing a physical copy because that would be pretty nice. They later showed off this game called Well Dweller. Honestly, I liked the art style that was going on with this game. They confirmed that it is coming out in 2026. Looks very fun, looks different. It's definitely something I would give a try. I hope they do a demo because I think that would answer for me if this game is for me or not. But the game looked nice from everything that they showed off. I like the way that the characters look, the art style. It was definitely something interesting to take a look at. Then they announced this game Never Away. They got a chance to have the developers speak about it before showing it off, and then the game was revealed. And weirdly enough, I kept saying to myself as I continued watching this trailer that it reminded me, at least the character design of it, little bit reminded me of Celeste in some ways. And as I was saying that to my head, they later confirmed that the co-creator that did the pixel art for Celeste is actually a part of this game. So I don't know if that had any relation into making the character design the way it was, but when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay, this kind of makes sense. But this is going to be a cool game coming from this company that I believe, if I remember correctly from what I saw, the Among Us developers are going to help publish. Because the Among Us developers talked about how they want to make a plan to publish all of these indie games for years to come, and I think this is one of their first projects that they're doing this for. They showed off this game called Hurting, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't think this is a game that's definitely for me. Because it just reminded me too much of the quests that you would do in games like Red Dead Redemption, for example, where you're gathering the animals and you're taking them back to wherever they came from. And I saw the gameplay and it looks very similar to that, but it looks like it's probably 30 times more difficult than what Red Dead did. Looks like they're gonna have options where it's just very difficult with enemies ahead or going through certain obstacles. And to be honest, with Red Dead, that was just so brutal. Well, brutal is not the right word. Sometimes it was just so annoying. That's what I would say. Annoying was the right word I would use here. And I feel like that there would definitely be similarities to me getting frustrated at this game due to my frustration at those quests at Red Dead Redemption. But it's coming out August 21st, if I remember correctly. And I mean, it looks nice. I was surprised with how well it looked and was running for it to be a Nintendo Switch 1 game. And I'm sure that a Switch 2 edition is probably in the works, or a free update is coming later in the year. They had a few games that came out today. One of those being Is This Seat Taken? Now, it looked pretty interesting. Definitely something I would not be picking up, but I feel like a lot of streamers, if they saw this game, they would want to stream this, as to me it looks like a pretty fun streaming game to have playing while you're interacting with your chat. Me personally, not something I will be picking up, and definitely something I will not be streaming. They showed off that Little Kitty Big City got an update, and when they said the words update, I was like, oh, okay, they're going to be announcing the Nintendo Switch 2 update for this game, as this game kind of looked a little rough on Switch at times, and the frame rate was definitely all over the place. I mean, even in the footage that they showed at the Indie World, the frame rate kind of looked rough in this update, but they did not confirm a Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game. I really thought that that was going to happen here today, but they just showed off that they have photo mode and a few other things that was coming to the game. Now, me personally, it's not something I really want right now. I would like to see this game get a Switch 2 update, as I think it really needed it, especially due to the fact that it was a later Switch title. I think a Switch 2 update would have made more sense. Maybe that's in development, because I thought it was so weird that it had presence here. And so then Nintendo came onto the screen with the presenters, and they were talking about how, like, we're done with the Switch 1 stuff, but we're going to show off our Nintendo Switch 2 headlines that we have. And basically, I think a lot of these games that they showed off the Switch 1 should be running and looking better onto the Switch 2. But without further ado, let's jump into the Switch 2 headlines, as there was a lot of cool things shown off here that was definitely unexpected. One of those games being Content Warning. I was definitely not expecting to see this game come to the Switch, but it was the first thing that they opened the Switch 2 headlines with, and I hope somehow, some way, I don't think this is going to be possible, because it's definitely not something that's incorporated into the original version of this game. But I think it would be funny if they could somehow incorporate the Nintendo Switch 2 camera into Content Warning. As you know, a lot of people are starting to somehow find ways to include the Switch 2 camera into their games. And I think Content Warning, if they could somehow pull it off, it could be really cool with that, especially with the voice chat that's coming to that game. I'm definitely going to be picking this one up. I've always thought that Content Warning was a very interesting game, but I never had anyone that wanted to play it with me, so I never got to play it. But that's not going to stop me when it comes to Switch 2. I'm probably still going to have no one to play with, and you kind of need friends for that game, so we'll have to figure out something. But it's coming out in 2026. Then they showed off this game that was being published by Devolver Digital, which is called Ball X Pit. They had the developer on the screen, and he said that this game is essentially a bunch of things that he loved from other games, and he combined all of that into one thing, which was Ball X Pit. I know one of the games that he mentioned as well that he was inspired by was Loop Hero. And as I saw this game, this is going to be the weirdest comparison, because it's not a good comparison, I don't think. But y'all know that mobile game ad that y'all always get that, like, is not a real game, and then somebody actually ended up making it? You have like a bunch of people, you have to choose blue or red in terms of like what you're like fighting enemies, and you're like multiplying the enemies, and you got like 1,000 enemies coming through you. As I saw the gameplay for this, I can't help but think about that. It even has what looks to be like a village mechanic into this, that a lot of those mobile games that we just talked about that they were advertising that didn't actually have that type of gameplay, it was just a village type of game. So just seeing that here, I was just like, wow. I don't know if anybody's going to see the similarities that I saw. I know that's a wild comparison, but I think that this game looks pretty cool and definitely something that I want to pick up. Then they showed off this game, which was Ultimate Sheep Reaction. I don't know. This is definitely a game that is a game. I'll leave it at that. I mean, looks pretty crazy. And I think if this has online multiplayer, as they showed multiplayer being a thing in this, and I hope online's an option, I think that this could probably be pretty fun with friends and family. So definitely something I'm going to be on the lookout. Then they showed off a brand new game called Glaciered. This is going to be coming out in 2026. And honestly, it looked pretty cool. You're like underwater, and it looked like it had Souls-like mechanics just a little bit, but not fully being a Souls-like game. It looked interesting. I definitely is something that I want to look into more as we learn more information. As they didn't show too much off, they had the developers talk about what they were working on here. This is definitely one that I want to keep my eye on, as I think that this could be a very special game. But I need to see more before I'm like locked into purchasing it, because I'm not 100% sure on this one yet. Then they ended the presentation off with a sizzle reel, which was a little bit weird if I do say so myself, but there was a few games there. They had this game called Winter Burrow, and honestly, it was so hard to see some of the footage on this stuff because they only showed it for maybe 6 to 7 seconds because they wanted to jump to the next game. Then they showed off Go Go Town. And I was in the progress of doing something else. I was writing something down for the video, and I just glanced at it. I was like, what in the world? They're making an Animal Crossing kart racing game? Which that's definitely not what this is. The art style, I don't know. With what I saw, the 2 seconds of footage right there from when I was writing down something, I couldn't help but think, oh my gosh, Animal Crossing kart racing, oh my gosh, this makes sense. And then I was like, wait a second, I'm watching an indie world. What is going on with me in my head? And then they ended the sizzle reel saying that Opus Prism Break is going to be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo Switch 1. Now, this is a game that I feel like is definitely going to struggle on the Switch 1. Could be wrong though. The Switch 1 is definitely capable for a lot of things, but the developers sometimes rush their Switch 1 versions or don't optimize it correctly and don't want to put the time or effort. So I feel like this is probably a game that you would want to play on the Switch 2, but I could be wrong, and it could still be amazing on Switch 1 nonetheless. There was no one more thing. I thought that was super weird. A little underwhelming to end on a sizzle reel. I think they put the sizzle reel in the middle of the presentation, and I think they should have ended the show off with the content warning game, because that was one that kind of threw everyone off, as that was a game that I don't think anyone thought would ever come to a console, let alone the Nintendo Switch. So I don't know who makes the decisions over there with Indie World, but I think there was poor planning right there. Content warning should have been the one last thing, and people would have went crazy. And weirdly enough, in the Japanese Indie World presentation, there was way more games that was shown off there than what we got in the US one. They had Demon School, which is apparently an RPG with elements of Persona and Shin Megami Tensei. That's what the developer said. It's coming out in September. I don't understand why this was not here, because they dropped a trailer that was definitely with English, so it could have just easily been put into the Indie World presentation that we saw. But I guess Nintendo has a reasoning for everything, as I think this would have been a cool thing to have in the Indie World, and I just don't understand why Nintendo didn't do this. Very weird. And then they showed off that Exit 8 was going to be getting a Nintendo Switch 2 edition. This is another thing that I was pretty thrown off to why they did not show over here at this Indie World, because that is the type of game announcement that a lot of people would have been going crazy for. I assume at some point we'll get it. I just don't know when. At the time of this recording, they haven't talked about it coming over here, but it's just a little weird that it wasn't on that Indie World that we saw. I don't know. Weird decisions was made here. I don't know if they were trying to get a certain age rating on the US Indie World presentation. I don't know, weird things over there. I'm sure there's a reasoning for everything, and hopefully that this comes over here to America, because that would be pretty cool, especially with how popular this thing is. And for our last story, Nintendo confirmed their lineup for Gamescom, which this information came out before the Indie World presentation, and everyone was freaking out because they thought that they might have accidentally confirmed that Sliksong was going to be at the Indie World presentation. It was quite funny to see everyone in my Discord server and on my Twitter timeline go crazy over this, but I knew that Sliksong was not going to show up here even with this confirmation. At most, it would have been a part of a sizzle reel. But they confirmed that at Nintendo Switch 2's booth, they are going to have games like Hollow Knight Sliksong available as a demo over there. And they also confirmed some new games that will be available to play there. Stuff that hasn't been available at previous things that Nintendo's been doing, showing off the Switch 2. Like, for example, the Nintendo Switch 2 experience events. And a few of those games consist of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I think is going to be very interesting to see up close how this game looks on Nintendo Switch 2. Elden Ring is also confirmed to have a playable demo, and on top of that, they're going to be having Borderlands 4, as there's a lot of questions regarding the Borderlands 4 Switch 2 version of the game, so it'll be cool to see that up close and give more confirmation on how this thing's going to run and look, because I think there's definitely concern due to just some of the comments that was made by, what's that guy's face? I'm like half asleep right now, the Gearbox dude. He was saying how it was going to be 30 frames per second, and people were kind of worried about the fact that they said 30 frames, as some of the comments seemed like they were trying to rush the Switch 2 version to come out. I don't know. Randy sometimes just does some crazy things, so it wouldn't surprise me if this is not a good version of the game. But I also feel like it could be a good version, as Gearbox has done really well with the Switch 1. So I hope Borderlands 4 is good, and I think we're going to get a good indication of what to expect with the Switch 2 version when we see it at this demo. Nintendo confirmed other things that would be available at their station, but that's kind of like the bigger stuff that we just have not typically been seeing at these type of events. So it's exciting to finally see that stuff arriving, and considering that there's a demo, hopefully we get a release date for Final Fantasy and Elden Ring at some point, because that's supposed to come out this year. We have no release dates. And guys, that is everything that I have for you. I want to hear from you. What was your guys' favorite game from the Indie World presentation? Also, are you somehow going to be at Gamescom? Are you excited for those demos that you guys are going to be able to play? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm also curious to see, do we trust Switchforce now that he got this Indie World thing correct? Because he's saying that a Nintendo Direct is happening at some point. He did confirm that it's not next week. So, interesting on that. I don't really know. That's kind of interesting. This whole Nintendo leaks and rumors thing, it's kind of like not something I want to follow as much now due to, you know, recent events. But guys, I've been talking for way too much. Make sure to backslash that subscribe button, like the video, check out the Twitter, Discord, Instagram, and all that good stuff. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.